Hello everybody, hope you're doing well. So I've just finished work and I tell you what, it's been one of these days in the last 24 hours that just so much information. I focus on the side quest for the first day, 2, maybe even 3 days actually after. But because there's so much going on, especially with the Banquet event, I did want to make a video early on in this, and I kind of felt like I've been rushed to make a type of video like this as well when it comes to the Banquet event and how many points you're going to need to do or get to the alliance-based threshold of the milestone of 34,500 points, as well as from a solo perspective, how many more further units you'll have to invest in order to get up to the final milestone of, I think, 111,700. So there's a lot of stuff. You'll have to bear with me because I will be creating a spreadsheet guide for the Banquet event in more kind of greater detail than what I'm going to be covering in this particular video. But there's actually a lot to take home and kind of consider. So I've seen a lot of people coming up with mathematics. It was something whilst I was on my lunch break today, I was just looking at like people's maths and stuff. And the problem is we've got tons of different mathematical kind of, not equations, but kind of build-ups to getting the milestone point thresholds. The problem with having this is that there's not one right answer. There's actually multiple. How are there multiple answers? Well, the biggest problem we've got to consider is the fact, and don't worry, I will be going to a section in the video where I'll be talking about, my mathematics towards this. But people have to understand there's not one particular way of dealing with this and kind of approaching this. The reason being is that if you go, like, people's approach to this is not going, hey, I've got all of the greater banquet crystals at this point. That's not the case. You will be at different points thresholds as you go through the banquet event. Yes, you could spend all your money one give and go, but the fact is you will have, especially for free to play, you will have different points in the month that or event itself that you'll have different points that don't match up against what the calculations are. I'll quickly explain before getting into the minutiae of the video. So how you start off with is actually a lot lower than you might think. In the it's not the Accolades calendar, it's the winter calendar. You start off with 3 banquet crystals, which gives you 90 points. Now, does 90 points get you anything on the ladder? Let's double check this. And it will, I won't for a solo perspective, but an alliance perspective, it's a very different story. It gets you really close to nothing. Like, the joke of this is that there's actually this extra accolades that help out. So to begin with accolades, you get 1 greater banquet crystal, which you can see you open up for 700 points, plus your 90, I think it is. It might be a bit more than that. So again, you get close to that alliance threshold of placement. You then put up to about like there-ish, but you need to get to that 840 to get to those other units. And that's that point of like, okay, well, you're not even on the ladder at that particular point. It's only when you start spending your own units on those greater banquet crystals or wait that you start climbing up. As soon as you buy 1 greater banquet crystal or open up, you immediately that to 800, which starts you on grabbing the units, which then starts you on that process. It's not a case of looking at, as I've said, and as many people have kind of like, given with their calculations. And they're right, by the way, to put those calculations together. But it's not a case of going, hey, by the way, you're at 16,190 points right off the bat. That's not the case. It would be the case if you are thinking about this from an event perspective of, going up a certain milestone, then going up a little bit more, then waiting a whole chunk of the month, and then going up a bit some more with it. So look, as much as like we're all kind of putting calculations in it, it's not a fair reflection of how you might approach this particular event. So I just want to kind of give that perspective out there first. Now let's get into what everyone else is doing. Lots of how the points work out and how much they kind of acquire, and where you kind of like go with it. So where do we begin with it? Let's go with the easy thing so far. The easy thing is going, yes, like everybody else, you get 23 greater banquet crystals throughout the event, the 2 weeks of the event. You also get 3 banquet crystals, which give 90 points. This gets you on the board for 16,190. I shouldn't say get you on the board because that doesn't really help out the situation. So let's theoretically say you got 16,190 points. Fantastic. Now, from these particular events, you then grab some extra units, which will be 275 plus 275. And then from an alliance perspective, or no, from a solo perspective, you then get an additional 600 units. So that is 600 plus 550, which is 1,150 units. Now, at this particular point, you can make a decision, and this is the crossroads with things. When I put together the full spreadsheet, because I haven't had time, by the way, to create something that I didn't think we'd be talking about this for another week, you're going to have scenarios. It's going to be a case like a path on like MCOC. You've then got the option. Do I go and invest further greater banquet crystals to kind of get further into this particular event? Or do I buy banquet crystals and only look to get to a certain point without having to invest a super amount of units in? Those are going to be your choices at that particular point. You at this point have that decision to make. So when I've talked about this idea of branching in different directions, it is like basically like a time split of branch with this one. And the kind of point that I've come to is that you can choose at this point to invest in 3. Well, look, you've got 1,150 units. Do I spend 900 units to get 3 greater banquet crystals, therefore giving me 8,400 extra points? Do that. That'll get you some good points. You need those points. But you'd also could add in and just stop at a point of, right, well, I'll just add a little bit more of I'll take those 250 units and get 16 greater standard banquet crystals for 2,080 points. That's a choice. And as I said, what we've done is we've done the low end of the fork. So the least amount of units you need to spend. Let's kind of like explain this better, because I don't think that's kind of like explained it. So let's explain it better like this. Free points from items given out. Again, it's not a fair reflection on what is here for the month. You're going to get, because of the gold track event, 300 extra units. What are you going to do with those? Invest them into greater banquet crystals? Yeah. That makes perfect sense. You might do some arena, get a further 300 units. Yeah. So what we're doing in this is going, right, you got 1,150 units from the milestones within this. We're adding in 16 banquet crystals worth, which is 250 units for 130 units a piece, 130 points a piece, which gives you 2,080 units, which you can see on the screen. 3 of the greater banquet crystals with units will be 8,400 points. The 16,100 points from greater banquet crystals throughout the month. And the banquet crystals you start off with the calendar for the month, well, no, 21st of December to be exact, gives you 26,670 points. And as I said, just to repeat myself, this is not going to be the correct scenario. It's an scenario, a scenario, how you ever want to look at this. So, to kind of give this kind of finality to it, if that's not even a word, an end point to all this, an end game from this scenario, this one of many scenarios which we need to kind of do for players, is that you will only need to spend 900 units to get an additional 780 points, 7,830 points, sorry. So yeah, that's it. 3 greater banquet crystals you'll have to buy, and you could theoretically get to the alliance milestone and stop. But this particular method employs you spending 250 units on standard banquet crystals. And that won't be a fair reflection on anybody else, because you'll be like, well, I could just spend 50 extra units and get a greater banquet crystal, do 4 instead of the 3, and it's like I've got that milestone and a crystal that's probably going to be more worth to me than the standard banquet crystals. And then if you want to look at the solo perspective, at this particular point, I think at the point of the 26,670 points, you could then add an additional 90k points and get yourself the final 9,900 units for the final milestone for solo. But again, as I said, this is a reflection of people spending that 250 extra units for free on 16 standard banquet crystals. But as I said, there's no point to it if you're at a certain point in the game going, why am I spending 250 units on greater banquet crystals? So that's a thought process I want to impart on you. I think in actuality, you might find yourself spending about 1,200 units from an alliance perspective. Yes, you can get away with a 900 unit spend, but at the end of the day, you're probably saying to yourself, well, why do I want to do that? Why do I want to kind of get to that particular threshold and point? Of course, other people have got their own kind of calculations for stuff. I'll just find a couple. I know that Cam's got his, which he says that based on the math, pop up with 3 stuff. GBCs, you need to additional 950 units for Alliance milestone. That again, like he's absolutely right. And as I said, this is a different scenario. This is the scenario of looking at if you were to like not get that extra GBC and use BCs. That again, it's like it's an interesting theory. It's not something I naturally support. I actually prefer Cam's look at this. But as I said, for me, when I'm putting together these guides, we like to create scenarios, and we haven't even gone 24 hours without this this dropping. So trying to get all this info and trying to get all these calculations done is it's a thing. But yeah, I want to do some further thoughts on the Banquet event. We've probably got a few more videos about the Banquet event before I start kind of listing off like guides and stuff like that. The thought process of like, is it actually bad this year? I want to look at some kind of more analytical and deep dives into like what you get back from it, because my particular point on the matter, and I will end this on this point, is like my particular thoughts on the matter is very reflective of how I feel of where I am, but it doesn't necessarily reflect where you are and other people are, because I've seen people say, they are happy about the Banquet event. They like some stuff of it. But for me, and that I've seen the people that kind of like align with what I'm saying, is that where I'm currently at in game, it's not a fair reflection of where I want to see the rewards, and that is something that I want to cover in another video. But in any case, thanks very much for watching, and what are your thoughts on some of these kind of approaches? And I'll see you in the next one. Check out some other content located on screen. Bye bye.